Now, if you're feeling hot, 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 it might be more about the rising temperatures and less about Calypsonian Arrow's hit song. But one thing we can't deny is that we have been experiencing a heat wave across TNT. And according to the Trinidad and Tobago Meteorological Service, this heat is expected to continue into October. And so joining us this morning to talk more about this is meteorologist Gary Benjamin. Mr. Benjamin, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us on Now. And I know that you're joining us by phone, but we're still happy to have you here.
Good morning, pleasant good morning to you and all your viewers and listeners.
Of course. Mr. Benjamin, before we get into the details of the conversation in terms of the heat wave or the heat that we've been experiencing, can you first give us some context in terms of how the Met Office measures that heat and how accurate that number is?
Okay, the Met Office would measure the atmospheric temperature by sampling the air through different sensors. And one could be electronic, or the other could be liquid and glass. And the technology has those thermometers very accurate at this time with minimal correction factors. And but the major thing about taking temperatures is the exposure of the instrument itself. So while some people may have an instrument, they may be exposing it in the wrong way, and therefore the temperatures that they would be recording may be invalid.
Yeah. Is that one of the reasons why we always try to ensure that the temperatures we're recording comes from Crown Point, or at least it comes from Piarco?
Piarco and Crown Point are the reference stations, the meteorological stations.
Yeah.
Of course, there is where the reference is, but we know by understanding the meteorology of Trinidad and Tobago and the climate that in built-up areas and other areas, the temperature could be a little higher than what is recorded at Piarco, because temperature could vary because of the topography and the different types of concrete buildings and asphalt and roofs.
Yeah. And so let's get into the hot days we've been experiencing. I know that the Met Office would have issued a warning saying that this is supposed to go into October. But one of the things I found very interesting, Mr. Benjamin, is that we are in the rainy season from June to December. So then how are we in the rainy season? We're trying to expect that sort of rainfall, but we're also experiencing this heat.
Well, first of all, let me make the correction. A heat wave is something different, and we are experiencing close to hot spells. There are definitions for heat waves and hot spells, and they may not have made the criteria to define what is happening as heat wave or hot spells, because the World Meteorological Organization has a definition for heat wave, which is the normal maximum temperature has to be exceeded by 5 degrees Celsius for 5 or more days. And Trinidad and Tobago has a definition for hot spells where we have 3 to 5 or more days of the temperature reaching above 34 degrees. So for a consecutive period of time, we have not been having that to really define it as a heat wave or a hot spell. But having said that, we know for a fact that we've been having consistently
it's been hot.
So whether we define it as a heat wave or not, we still have to behave and act in such ways as not to let the heat cause any ill effects to us. But the reasons for that this year is that we have a number of factors. And you asked the question, why is it in the rainy season? Well, in the rainy season is when we have our heat season in Trinidad and Tobago, because of the fact that at that time, in April to May, the sun is traveling northward into the northern hemisphere, and therefore it is concentrated over Trinidad and Tobago at that time. And when it begins its southward march during August and October, we have another heat season peak where the sun is concentrated. So the major reason for the heat is because of the concentration of the sun over us, and that happens every year. So that our heat season has 2 peaks, April to May and August to October, and we are in the middle of one of those peaks right now. So that we have a number of factors which would contribute to the sustained peaks of heat at this time. And one of them besides being our normal heat season, one of them is the Atlantic is very warm, more warmer than normal this year, and it brings within the trade wind a contribution to the heat. Also, we are in the El Nino phase of the ENSO, which would tend to tamp down the development of clouds, and therefore we have clear skies. And what clouds would do during the daytime is to block that incoming solar radiation from reaching the surface. When we have no clouds and limited clouds, then we have the full brunt of the sunlight adding to the heat.
Yeah.
Also, the tropical Atlantic is very active at this time, and therefore when we have these tropical cyclones passing just northeast of us, it tends to suck up some of the available moisture, therefore leaving even clearer skies around our area, and also pulls some air from the equator, and therefore just a little more added heat. So all these factors come together this year to have the sustained maximum temperatures at around 33 degrees Celsius.
Yeah.
It's the sustained temperatures that we are feeling. And sometimes it goes above that in little peaks, but not for long enough to define it as a hot spell.
As a heat wave, because I know that we would have also experienced, was it our hottest day in August? Do you remember the temperature that was, and what would have, is it everything that you mentioned would have contributed to that being the hottest day?
Yes, we would have those spikes. I think it has been verified to around 35.2 degrees Celsius.
Yes.
Now, sometimes when we record 34 degrees, it means the temperature is anywhere for recording and reporting purposes. It means the temperature is anywhere between 33.5 to 34.4, where we round it off to the nearest whole one. But when we're looking at the climate, we look at the 0.1s and the 0.2s. So we had, I think we had verified a 35.2 sometime late last month or earlier this month. I can't remember the exact date.
Yeah, it definitely would have been late last month. But also, too, Mr. Benjamin, another thing I'm finding strange is that we are experiencing the very hot temperatures, but the mornings are also pretty hot as well. Because I know those lows can maybe drop to about 24, but I realized, doing some research, we may have gone above 25, 26. So is it also because of the heat we're experiencing, we're also getting those very warm mornings and very warm late nights?
Yes, it is, because we're in the heat season and the heat builds up, and then we have all these other factors which I spoke about earlier on just now. And when that builds up during the day, we have the urban heat island that sustains the temperature during the night. Now, the rate of loss of energy to the atmosphere during the night could be slowed if we have any thin layer of cloud. But even if we don't have a thin layer of cloud above, because of the normal rate of loss to the space, by the time we're trying to lose that heat, that excessive heat what build up in the night, by the time we try to lose that heat, it's morning again, and then the cycle starts again. So we're starting with warm nights coming into the morning, and then the heat comes again, so that we're continuously having high temperatures in the daytime, high peaks too, and also high nighttime temperatures, or relatively high.
I know you would have mentioned some of the causes for the heat, the high temperatures that they're experiencing now, but I also want to know in terms of some of the effects, because I was having a conversation recently and someone was saying that, sometimes maybe the earthquake, for example, we experienced last week may have been caused by the heat. I know worldwide it's also been very, very hot. Places in Europe, places in the US, Morocco also had a very devastating earthquake recently. Is there any sort of relationship between that heat, those high temperatures, and earthquakes?
Well, there has been no scientific connection made between heat waves and earthquakes. And now Europe so I'm saying there's no connection as far as we know at this time.
Right.
And most likely it is not. But Europe is experiencing heat waves because in those subtropical areas, that is where when the air leaves in the upper atmosphere and reaches those areas, taking some heat away from the tropics into the subtropicals, where you would find most of the deserts of the world, it begins to sink, and with sometimes compressional heating, forms a high-pressure cell, and that high-pressure cell in the northern hemisphere is clockwise. So it tends to take that warm air from over close to Africa and pushes it into Europe and then it is stagnated over Europe, and that is the type of heat wave they are having. So those types of heat waves are very much stronger than what we have been. As I said, we define what we've been having. If we could define it, we would define it as hot spells. It has not even made the criteria for hot spells as yet, but the sustained heat can be very uncomfortable for all of us. So even if we do not define it as a hot spell, staying out in the sun in this type of sunlight and heat buildup could be very detrimental sometimes and could get you sick in some ways.
And so that leads into my next question, Mr. Benjamin, because I know from time to time, I think I saw a release yesterday where the Met Office will put out these warnings in terms of how hot the temperatures are going to get. Any words of advice for members of the public? You mentioned, for example, staying out of the sun, but for those who have to run errands and do things, outside, how would you advise them to protect themselves in order for us to be comfortable?
Okay, if you have to work in the sun, then of course you should be following certain criteria for the type of work you're doing and the type of uniform that you would wear that would help to make your body able to breathe, so to speak, to be able to cool down as much as possible. Wear clothing that would have you very comfortable and aerated. The thing is that whether you're weak or you're strong, you're elderly or you're young, nobody could really withstand staying in this type of heat outside for very long. So take breaks, get your sips of water, try to put in your electrolytes because in the sweating you may lose more than water to your body, and the doctors and medical personnel would be able to explain that better than me. But try to take breaks out of the sun, keep rehydrating yourself. You could use an umbrella because sometimes a hat might be tight on your head and not allowing your head enough to breathe and air out. But the idea is this: if you don't have to be in the sun, don't be out there. Trinidad and Tobago is a tropical country. It is very hot to all of us, and it is not the first year. This is our heat season, and we are having sustained heat because of a number of factors coming together this year, and one of them is being in the El Nino, and we have not been having much cloud cover to keep down the heat. So the thing is, try to stay out of the heat as much as possible. Don't wait until the Met Office say it's going to be hot, because once you're living in Trinidad, you know it is hot.
It is hot. And Mr. Benjamin, my final question for you quickly, can we expect this to go into October and beyond, or should we get a little bit of ease at the end of October?
Okay, so when I explain the reason for the heat season, we know that the sun is in the northern hemisphere and at times concentrated over us. And that is the summer for the northern hemisphere. Let nobody hear you say that I say Trinidad has summer. However you want to define it, but I'm speaking for the northern
Mr. Benjamin.
The sun is in the northern hemisphere at this time. It's the northern hemisphere summer. So when the sun begins to make its apparent motion back to the southern hemisphere, we will begin to see fall time, autumn time in the northern hemisphere, and therefore the sun will be moving away and less concentrated in the northern hemisphere and over our areas. So we're looking at they begin to taper off by the end of October into November, when we get our cooler periods, and the cooler times for Trinidad and Tobago is around Christmas time and Carnival time. So that is our cooler time. So when the sun begins to go to the south of the equator, and we begin to experience less intense concentrated sunlight, then we would see some drop in the average or normal temperatures.
Yeah. Mr. Benjamin, let me thank you so much for joining us this morning. Always a pleasure when you join, and I hope that we can take those solutions that you have in terms of how we can protect ourselves from the heat, at least as we look forward to that ease at the end of October into November. So thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Much appreciated, and I hope everybody take care and be safe.
Thank you. And that was meteorologist Mr. Gary Benjamin just giving us some tips to how we can stay cool and warm as we battle the heat season. You're on the Now Morning Show. Let's take a break and be right back. Stay with us.